Okay, we were talking about long-term effects of a concussion. There's a relatively new. Is this too much? There's a relatively newly described disease called CTE, chronic traumatic encephalopathy, and that has been found in football players, even if they haven't necessarily been diagnosed with a concussion, but in football players that have been hit in the head a lot, which is all football players, they're finding that in the long term there is so encephalopathy means that there's abnormal brain anatomy, and that's mostly in the frontal lobe. And the frontal lobe, of course, is what controls personality, morality, judgment, and higher cognitive functions. So the long-term effects of multiple concussions are quite severe, to the point where some individuals will experience amnesia long after the events, long after the concussion. So very, very dangerous and very much in the medical limelight right now. You get a concussion in football, like I said, from being hit mostly in the side of the head, though any kind of blunt force to the front of your skull could cause a concussion. Sometimes falling down onto turf, or like in a basketball game, falling down onto the court with where your head hits first, or body then head, even in the back of your head, can cause a concussion. It's just any kind of jarring force to the brain, and there are multiple ways this would occur. Side effects of a concussion, short and long term, I think we went over most of that. Cortisone shots. Cortisone is a steroid that is an anti-inflammatory class of steroid, as opposed to a anabolic or a muscle-growing steroid. Cortisone in a joint causes the immune system to shut off, and what that means is swelling goes away, and when there's no swelling, there's less pain. So the injury's not gone. It doesn't fix the injury, but it makes it feel like the injury is not there. So the individual can play or perform as if the injury was no longer present in, well, sometimes a little less than a week, sometimes a little more than a week. The immune system isn't shut off any longer. The pain and the swelling come back. And what ends up happening with people that take cortisone shots over the long term, they end up ruining their joints. Bill Walton, who was a basketball player in the 70s, took cortisone shots and in his ankles and knees, and they are just completely degraded. And I think he's had to have joint replacements. So it causes osteoarthritis, osteopathy, and bone and cartilage degradation. Is that enough science stuff? You sure? Okay. Okay, how do I view coaching? Coaching is a blast. Coaching is the only way to still feel like you're a part of a sport that you love. I view my particular sport of football as a way to grow men. That sounds weird, but to make a young man into the exact person that he's going to become, and make him better in terms of having a family work ethic. So I love coaching and think it's a very positive thing. I was coached quite differently than I coach myself. It was a different time, to be sure, not to sound too old or old school, but it was a much more violent and degrading atmosphere. And as a high school freshman and sophomore, coaches prodded us into acts of violence that really shaped the kind of football player and person that we'd be later on, and that's not done anymore. So It's a lot different now, and it's a lot better now. What is a procedure coaches and athletes go through when injured? Well, there's a difference between being hurt and being injured. A real injury means that you can no longer perform. Being hurt is something that all athletes, regardless of sport, understand as not limiting what you do on the field. If you're hurt and you can still run, then coaches expect the athletes to still go out and do their job. And for the most part, athletes agree with that. Now, when someone is injured, simply they cannot play, and they can't. If the individual can't perform because of the injury, then there's no point in having that person out on the field. What procedure did you go through when injured? Again, a lot different. I tried to hide injuries from my parents so that they wouldn't make me stop playing, and hide them from coaches so that they wouldn't stop me from playing. It really takes a much more observant eye as a coach to find when one of your players is not performing because of an injury. Have you ever played an athlete or seen a coach play an injured player? I can think of an instance in California when our head coach was playing. I was a coach. Was playing an individual who had an ankle injury, and I kept telling the coach to pull this kid out. And finally, the poor kid was limping so badly. He actually went on. He's graduated from Yale now, but he was limping so badly that I yelled at the coach, "Take him out and put me in," even though I was an old fat man coaching. So yeah, I've seen it, and I don't agree with it at all. I think that's counterproductive to the goals of the team, which is to perform and to win. I know the effects of long-term effects of joint injury in my own knees, and I don't want to see any player go through that. Now, hypocritically, I have allowed a player this year to play whose knees were terrible, and he, it was a chronic injury. He wanted to play. He could perform. He could perform his duties, and so I gave him my blessing. Now he luckily didn't need surgery after the season, but that was certainly on my mind. So not only have I seen it done, I've done it. I'd like to think that there were extenuating circumstances when I did it, but like I said, that could be hypocritical. Any other thoughts on the situation? I don't want to see any young man. I'm coaching in high school. I don't want to see any high school player hurt. I don't want to see any high school player injured chronically enough to have any kind of effects on them long term. Anything else, buddy? You sure?
Yep.
Okay. Sorry, I suck.